Today, we are very excited to be focused on digital distribution. So we've spoken a lot over the years about making digital books, about our workflows for that, about tools we use, internal processes. But we haven't had a whole lot of talk about distribution, about what happens once after you've made the book, after you've gotten it out into the world. How do you do that? How do you make sure that people keep finding it? What are some different avenues for doing that? What works, what is it more of a challenge. So we're very excited to have two great speakers here today to talk about that very topic. We have first speaking will be Benjamin Tiven, the co-director of Library Stack, and then following Ben, Philip Hearn from the Project MUSE, who's the senior publisher relations manager there, will be speaking as well. They'll each have a kind of 15 to 20 minutes to talk. And then afterwards, we will do our usual Q&A. Of course, if you have questions as you're going, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Lauren Macklem will be moderating that at the end, and we will have some time. Be sure to leave some time for that Q&A. Okay, so without further ado, I will turn it over to our speakers. To our first speaker, Benjamin Tiven from Library Stack.
Hi, thank you all very much. Thank you, Greg, for inviting me, and thank you everyone for having me. I'm here representing Library Stack. We're a very small team of 3 people, and I'm going to walk through some stuff on our website and talk through how we move publications around and some of the kind of co-publications we've made or other participation we've done with other outside museums or art spaces. Just share my screen. This is coming through okay. So this is Library Stack. It's designed to emulate browsing a library on the opening page. Every one of these things represents an item, a publication, a film, a podcast, a book. There's a whole host of multimedia objects. If you see a big cluster of images, that represents some kind of series of sibling publications. And you can you can sift the database through all of these menus on the top, and there's other ways to browse on the side. There's a host of other research guides that are sort of almost like libguides, like sort of very specialty topic overviews with editorialization. You can sift down here by LCSH category and keywords and other kinds of taxonomies. And you have your bookshelf tool, which you'll see in a second, but you can create your own lists and clusters of objects and annotate them and share them with others and so on. Okay, I put together a couple of selected things to look at together. So these are sort of examples of other kinds of publication, museum publications that we have had, are either following or paying attention to or have had some role in, and then also some projects we've made with museums. Okay, so one example might be this L'Internazionale, this consortium of museums and also education spaces across Europe who have a pretty robust publishing program. This is books and projects. Sometimes they relate to their curatorial and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they are just independent streams of editorial research and sometimes they're sort of external projects being filtered through this publication structure. So we have these all collected here. There's under one banner, and each one of these represents some book, and here's a catalog page for how we would index this object. And all of the metadata that we catalog goes into external sources like Alma and ProQuest, Alma, Exlibris, Claravit, OCLC, and EBSCO, excuse me. So we're sort of porting metadata into the library system at large. I'll show you some of those in a second. Oops, here was another example. It's a Carnegie Museum sort of custom specialty podcast series. So this is one episode of this. Here's the whole series. Looks just like the other series page. We index a lot of podcasts. We find podcasts are very fascinating, and there's lots of interesting things happening in podcast world. So you can download this object, or you can stream it directly, which looks like this. I'll play it for a second. You can see, you can't hear it because the audio is coming into my feed, but you can see it's tracked with a synced transcript. And then here's the Alma record for this episode. For this episode, I'm just using Harvard Search Layer because it doesn't require a login, and I don't have any creds anywhere. So you can see the basic cataloging coming through into, and obviously this is replicated in any Alma or EBSCO or whatever system. Another podcast series, I'm sure you guys are familiar with a lot of this, but we're just paying attention to the ways that people are putting material out in atypical forms and how can we conform them into a kind of cohesive multimedia library. Similar project, this is the Reina Sofia, another series of books that I think are often like peripherally related to exhibition making, but sometimes are just their own initiatives. There's similar ones like this from the Van Abbe Museum and the MUCA that are even distinct from this series, the L'Internazionale, although they are all in the same kind of cluster together. Here's a new series from the Fondation Ricard in Paris that's artists and critics in dialogue. So each one of these is a PDF, essentially, like a kind of one essay pamphlet or booklet. And so we're tracking this series. We have lots of interest in these artists and these critics, and a lot of their names recur in across the database. If you click someone's name, we have lots of other projects that involve Bina Choi. So we're trying to build a kind of lateral collection and database and functional way to navigate all of the broad range of publishing that is generally missed by other indexing systems across art and design. I can't, there we go. So slightly different. This is an exhibition catalog, an EPUB. Here's our record for it. This is a show in Basel, Switzerland at the museum, the the Tingley Museum. And you can download it or launch it in real time, and it will look like this. And it's an EPUB that is containing reconstructions of early multimedia art. So as you scroll through this book, you can click a chapter and see early works that are generally like they had to be reconstructed for this ebook. This has audio, which now I can hear. They're all MP4s. So a lot of these, there were some pretty interesting like early Flash and multimedia artworks that were reconstructed for this book. Oops. So, you're not getting the original archival object per se, but you are getting like as faithful a reproduction of what it was like as the authors and designers could manage. The woman who designed this book is also one of the artists in this show. And I just talking to her a couple weeks ago and was explaining all this to me. It was totally fascinating. So anyways, interesting approach to an exhibition catalog when the material doesn't want to naturally behave in a book. Okay, I'm going to move on to a few that I have somewhat more to say about specifically. So here's a series of e-publications from the CCA Museum in Montreal that we had nothing to do with making, but we did have something to do with how they are distributed. And so when you click on, I believe this was a symposium, and all of the symposium lectures were compendiumized and designed in very handsome formats. There's ebook and PDF editions of each one. When you click on them on CCA's site, you generally get down here or down here, you'll get a link to us. So we're here, LibraryStack is here functioning as a distribution mechanism, as a kind of open access distribution mechanism. LibraryStack is not, technically speaking, an open access database, but it does behave that way in many ways, and it can behave that way. Here is our catalog record of all of these CCA objects. So for each essay, you have two formats, and in both cases, you may either download the object or view it online. So I've already loaded one of these, so here's a PDF viewer, and you can extract it also from up here. You can download it here or repaste, share the link and so on. Or you can view the PDF, view the EPUB in our house ebook reader online. So you can just directly interact with this material. they have very nice ebook style in this series, which should be commended. Okay, so here is a book that so moving on, this is another exhibition catalog. This is a book that Library Stack made with the Singapore Art Museum. It's a catalog to a show, which I have here. It's called Proof of Personhood. It was the exhibition. It was in 2022, I think, or the end, end of 2023 to beginning of 2024. It was all about artistic responses to the question of authenticity and identity in an age of AI. So we were commissioned by this museum and specifically this curator to make an ebook catalog to it. We were freed from any restrictions about how to approach it. The show had already closed, so this was there was a funding line to make this book, and it had been delayed for external reasons. And when it finally came to us, we were told we could sort of do anything we wanted, and we worked closely with this curator. So you click here, and it will launch for you in the browser in the same way. And so we worked with two designers, Casper Lam and Eugen Park, who are called Synoptic Office in New York, and we came up with this ebook template that's uncommon and serves a lot of these strange needs, and we thought was pretty interesting, and we will plan to reuse, where you can have multimedia objects in the TOC. You have a lot of styling capability that you can deploy in different ways. We had some of these videos are made by AI. This was maybe a year and a half ago. So for example, here's a long essay. You have space. Handling footnotes was a big project of this book. The way it will showcase captions or footnotes, the way it's styled for a page, and you can also read this on in any other ebook reader. So you can go through this essay. It has here's some nice. You can have an image as a footnote. And this is how it handles captions for embedded images. And there's a lot of other things that can be deployed in how you nest text or showcase specialty objects. There was another, let's see, there's an all image section from an imaginary designer who made these very handsome templates that you can read and represent a sort of personhood being shaped by AI, essentially. And an essay here, optimal brain damage. This is it's somewhat opaque, stylistically difficult, but it is an art theoretical essay this was also excerpted in eFlux's notes, sort of participates in that kind of realm of speculative theory. Just want to showcase this. This was a pretty exciting project. You'll notice, interestingly, that there's actually no exhibition images, and only a handful of artists from the exhibition participated in the book in the end, for all kinds of reasons. But we kind of treated this opportunity as a moment to make a reader on AI as much as a catalog to the show. And this was the curator's wish. So, okay. I want to look at one other ebook that we made last year. An image of colonial violence pulled from the air. So this is essentially a monographic survey of an architecture firm, in short. It's a spatial logic, ecological forensics firm based in Trondheim, Norway. And similarly, this was made in collaboration with an art space in the UK, but was by and large our own editorial ambitions and collaboration with Interpret, the group. So a survey of 10 years of their practice. You have an opening section of images that kind of sets the stage for what exactly is their problem set and how do they operate. Then you have, there's a timeline of the history of ecocide in law. And law is an interest of Library Stack's. Human rights law is becoming a thing we are collecting more materials about insofar as they overlap with art, design, architecture. And then there's a section, this lexicon section, where the terminology that this firm uses to describe their practice was they wrote an essay describing each term, and you can scroll through and read this as an essay, and this kind of, but you can also read it in segments, and this kind of menu follows with you in different places, and you can just jump section to section. Um, and so this is just, oh, and then there is, at the end, there's also a section showcasing project by project, or like a selection of their projects and the material produced for each one. So you get a sense of the graphic and visual scope of their techniques and how they produce evidence for legal contexts using methods that come from architecture and come from digital design of various kinds. Okay, and just, you know, as just to, let's see. So I have just to my last few minutes here, a few other books. I won't go into each one, but we made this book, a kind of reader on typography that was pointing to because it was made in collaboration with a print press. And so we have evolved some strategies for making ebooks and print books simultaneously, which is a complicated challenge in some cases. And I have one last book up that is just an interesting showcase from the point of view of open access policies and open access publishing as its own field. So here's a book from a publisher who we have many materials from this publisher, but publisher in Berlin where the book is an open access book in a proper open access funding structure, and similarly to the CCA pamphlets. Yeah, you can download it, you can launch it online in a reader, and when you do so, you can also embed this object and use this code to kind of create a link between an original publishing site and the library archiving site, so that, you know, our kind of evolving argument about digital distribution is something like a conjoined functionality between the open internet and the structured system of the library world, and kind of finding ways to, I mean, LibraStack is itself like a gigantic attempt to bridge them, but in this item by item case, you know, we're trying to create ways to build bridges between public internet distribution and institutional distribution as such. Okay, that's my walkthrough. I can pause there. I know there were maybe special questions, but I can come back at the end. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We'll do questions at the end of both presentations, and so we'll return to them after we hear from Philip. So handing it over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much. I just had to find that mute button after I shared my screen. So thank you so much for inviting me. And Ben, that was fantastic. I'm really looking forward to digging into LibraryStack. So thank you for sharing all of that. And what you said about open access, I think will be a pretty good transition into some of the things that I'm going to talk about here. So I'm Phil Hearn. I'm the Senior Publisher Relations Manager at Project MUSE. I've been at Muse for about 15 years. And so I'll be talking just about some of what's going on right now in digital aggregation, some of the initiatives that we're working on, things we're anticipating, the challenges we're navigating. AI is going to show up as it always does, and just how, you know, in the digital landscape, things are rapidly changing all the time, and how the aggregators role in, you know, being that bridge between, you know, the publishers putting out, you know, all this essential scholarship and the readers, you know, and the libraries who help to curate those, how those are evolving. So I'll be talking about three main topics. You know, first I'll sort of summarize Project Muse, especially for anybody who's not familiar. I'll talk about some of our open access initiatives, including an exciting one with a museum partner, and then kind of zoom out into how all of those changes are affecting how we handle metadata, how we look at usage, and how artificial intelligence is playing into each of those factors. So Just starting out with a bird's eye view of Project Muse, we are part of the Johns Hopkins University Press. We actually began very much as a project between the press and the Eisenhower Library here at Johns Hopkins University back in 1995. And the effort was to see if we could successfully aggregate the journals from Johns Hopkins University Press online and then sell online subscriptions to institutions. That project ended up being very successful. And around the turn of the millennium, we started bringing on more publishers to that initiative. So at this time, we have over 700 active journals on Project Muse, and we have 118,000 ebooks from over 470 publishers from around the world. As far as open access, over the last decade, we've really been making a lot of effort to enhance what we can support with open access publications. So we have over 6,800 OA books, 24 Diamond open access journals, and then 110 subscribe to open journals, which I will talk about in just a few moments. We have 3,200 institutional subscribers across 78 countries. And the content on Muse this year, we're seeing an average of around 2 million hits per month across all of our content. With the rise of open access, it is a whole new territory. So when we began with Project Muse and everything was sort of locked down to institutional subscribers, it's a very different space, as I'm sure many of you already realize when you open that up to the entire world, essentially. So right now, about 25% of our usage comes from the small amount of open access, relatively small amount of open access material that we have. And most of that usage comes from users that are not affiliated with institutions formally. So really, broadening the reach of who we're able to reach around the world. As a nonprofit, we work only with other nonprofit publishers. Our publishing partners include university presses, scholarly societies, academic departments, museum publishers, and any other nonprofit independent press. That really is a key part of our mission. One of the main differentiators at Project Muse is as an aggregator that we do work only with nonprofits and we return almost 3/4 of our revenue back into that nonprofit publishing ecosystem. So all of it goes to support that work, the scholarship that the nonprofit publishers are putting out. So as we were starting to explore open access models and how we can support open access models in a way that's more embedded with our programs. And as OA mandates have changed around the world and publishers are dealing with different requirements depending on where they're publishing, we wanted to invest in a sustainable alternative to those author pays or read and publish models in open access, which often depend on APCs to fund the open access work. So we began exploring the feasibility and planning of a model called Subscribe to Open in 2021. And that was supported by a Mellon-funded grant. And it's a model that's built on library support rather than author payments. We spent a few years working on it and thinking about how we could embed it within our journal products, our journal collections. And I will show you what we came up with. So this is the very general workflow for S2O or Subscribe to Open, but essentially a handful of journals, actually way more than we expected. So over 100 journals that are part of our collections opted into S2O. And if we hit a sustainability target in any given year, and we set that very high, so that's set at 98% of our annual revenue target. If we hit that in any given year, all of the new issues from S2O journals will publish open access on Project Muse. So the back issues will remain behind the paywall, as will any other collection journals that are not participating in S2O, but the new content in that year would be open access. So that's that blue path there going upward if we meet our threshold. If we do not meet that sustainability threshold from library subscriptions, we take the orange path going downward. So if that happens, it's business as usual. So all of the new issues would publish behind the paywall. Only subscribing institutions would have access to both the new and the back issues there. So regardless of which path we take, this is linked to our collections, the revenue that we get from those subscriptions. So the journals could count on a consistent amount of revenue no matter what happens. So it was very low risk for the journals. It was very low risk for the libraries because it's the exact same collections that they've been subscribing to for 30 years. They just had to renew, but now there's this added benefit of they're supporting open access while they're doing it. So I'm very happy to say that we launched this in 2025. We hit our threshold in both 2025 and 2026. So we've had 2 years successfully so far of opening the current issues for S2O journals. So this is one of the main ways that we've embedded open access into our business model, and we're really hoping to find more ways to do that. So I'm now going to pivot to talk about an initiative that we worked on with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum that is also publishing in an open access capacity. So work on the 7-volume Encyclopedia of Camps and Ghettos from 1933 to 1945 began over 20 years ago and involved the work of over 700 scholars in history and Holocaust studies. And when they began this work, it was originally expected to uncover, maybe hundreds of camps and ghettos that took place during the Holocaust. But in fact, their research yielded thousands and thousands of sites. So now there's over 36,000 locations that these volumes are documenting. So when the museum was looking to expand the reach of this research, they selected Project MUSE to develop and host a new digital edition of the encyclopedia. So we've been working with them over the past several years to convert the files from the first 4 volumes, which were all in print, and then to lay the groundwork for the 3 subsequent files to publish in a digital only and open access capacity. So I really want to thank the Holocaust Museum for trusting us with these volumes and working so closely and collaboratively with us on every element of this digital publication. And it being open access really was key. It was important to us and the museum that there be no paywalls or other impediments from users in accessing this information. We also knew that with a fully digital resource, we could imagine new ways that scholars and other audiences could engage with the material. So one of the biggest innovations that we put together is an interactive map that is both a visualization of all the sites that the encyclopedia documents, but also a way into the text. So this is just a glimpse of that map. So again, as a visual representation, it immediately represents the scale of the Holocaust of all these locations that this persecution took place. But at the same time, users can zoom in, they can make connections between sites, they can filter by category or by country, things like that. But also they can drill down from each one of these points on the map into the full text of the volume. So it really is a way of enhancing what research capacity there is with what was previously just a series of thick volumes on the shelf. So it's an iterative project. So as I mentioned, we launched the first 4 volumes. We launched the first part of the 5th volume just in May, and we'll be continuously publishing more volumes over the following years. And as they publish, more spots will be added to this map, and new content will be added to the resource on Project MUSE. So, of course, the hosting and the design and all of this is so important to these resources. But as Ben alluded to, there's also that metadata piece, that downstream piece of making sure that users who are going to be interested in what you're hosting and what you're distributing are able to find it in the first place. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about how we're working with metadata and how that landscape is changing a little bit to bring users to these resources. MUSE works with dozens of discovery partners around the world. This is just a handful of them, but essentially most folks who are using Project Muse are not beginning their journey there. They're starting with their library, they're starting with Google, and we need to make sure that the metadata for everything that we host, be it our subscription collections or any of the open access items on our platform, are distributed downstream so that others can find them. So the folks that we're reaching downstream, that audience is shifting over time, because at the very beginning, we were talking about only end users. We're talking about subscribed end users at an institution who want to use their library platform to do research and find their way to the full text. But now, more and more, we're seeing automated bot users as sort of both an audience and a challenge to deal with in the new space that we're in. Um, and that has been exacerbated by how much open access content we have. Because again, when the content is open access, it's open to the world, and that includes crawlers, that includes AI bots, that includes anything you can imagine. So I've categorized usage in kind of three buckets here. I'll actually start from the right. But here on the right, we have, counter compliant usage. So you could think of the traditional usage reports that a library looks at. It tells them how their patrons are using the resources that they subscribe to, and they use those reports to help understand what they should renew and what they might be able to de-emphasize, et cetera. So they can count on most of that usage to be a human accessing what they've subscribed to. All the way on the left, we have usage that's not linked to any known institutional IP. So that is when something is open access, just the usage that we see come through that is, we can't identify an IP with it. So it could be a person that's off-site, or a person that's not affiliated with the university, or it could be not a person at all. They could be a bot. So that gets us into this middle space of how do we define different bots and what they're doing, and how they are serving the purpose of the content that we have on our platform. There are the bad bots that are trying to basically do harm, trying to do things that are illicit, and we have lots of checks in place to make sure that they cannot make it through. We have things like CAPTCHAs. We work with a service called Traffic Defender to help mitigate that sort of activity. But as we're seeing more and more users gravitate toward things like the AI summaries, on a Google landing page and things like that, we have to be careful about saying all bots are bad, because our ultimate goal is to be meeting users where they are. And if users are starting to use AI summaries and other, similar tools to navigate this sort of content, we do want to make sure that our publishers' work can be found there, and especially with consideration that it be linked and properly attributed and all of that. So we are actively in a real balancing act right now, because it's kind of a whack-a-mole game of navigating which bots to trust, which ones that we should allow through, and why. So we're relatively early days and fully understanding that landscape, but it's changing constantly, and we are looking closely at what makes the most sense for our platform. And I think a line I'd like to draw, when we think about AI, many of us thinking about LLMs in publishing are thinking about the licensing side of things, so, OpenAI paying a certain amount of money to license the content from a publisher to then train that content on. But there is a whole other side to it, and that is discovery. So we do need to kind of think about it in those two terms, because if users are in a place where AI is a primary discovery tool for them, we have to make sure that what's on Project Muse can be discovered there. So one of the models that we are investigating and seeing examples of out in the library marketplace is the MCP. So this is a sort of very, very pedestrian, non-technical way of looking at it. But essentially, the way that an MCP can work with an LLM is it's kind of like a gateway between the library and the services that they subscribe to. So it's this layer that's in between where a library patron might engage with, an LLM interface through their library. And then that LLM would only query things that the library is subscribing to and then surface those for the end user. And then that is a mode for them to discover. So we're already seeing libraries start to experiment with this. And we are collaborating and investigating with them how this might look, making sure that we're being extremely careful and cautious with the our publishers' work. We want to make sure that nothing is being used in a way that is not sanctioned and understood by the publishers that we're working with, while at the same time making sure that we are moving quickly enough to keep up with things that are changing. So again, very early days with this. We're not actively working with any MCP pilots or anything like that, but that is in our future as we look at what we need to um, what we need to assess as far as what we participate in. Um, the last thing I'll talk about is relating to AI, how we've used it internally to help solve some problems. Um, so the biggest challenge that we have faced, or one of the biggest challenges we faced in recent years, comes down to accessibility mandates and maintaining this double A compliance on our platform. So as I mentioned, we have been around for 30 years. We have many files that are old scanned PDFs, from journals from way back when. I think the oldest piece of content on Muse is a journal article or journal issue from 1905. So there's a real range of how accessible the files on Project Muse are. And there was the EAA in the EU, and then the ADA Title II that was actually going to be this April, but they pushed it another year. So we have until 2027 to comply with those terms. But each one of these mandates, is really making sure that the publishing world is making their online content as accessible as possible. And it's a really important goal, and it's essential that we meet those standards even without the mandates. But it's also a huge lift and a huge challenge, especially for publishers with a deep backlist. And for us as an aggregator, that challenge is compounded because we don't have the direct control, over the holdings that a publisher might have. And just to give a brief scale of how much content on Project Muse is pretty old. It's
Hi, everybody. I think we lost Phil for a second. One moment. Okay, I think Phil will be right back. Sorry for the interruption. In the meantime, as we're waiting for Philip to return, please feel free to put some questions in the chat if you have them, and we'll have a Q&A as soon as he is done.
I think I vanished there.
You did. It's
I
all good.
apologize.
We lost you just as you were talking about the amount of content of older legacy content that you have versus newer material.
Okay, I'm almost at the end of my talk, so thank you and apologies for that. But I will just share this final slide so you can all take a look at what we put together for publishers to manage their alt text on Project Muse. So We essentially, because we had millions and millions of images going back decades, we came up with a tool that generated alt text for every image that we have on our platform, but gave publishers the opportunity to go in, add their own if they don't already have it. Um, Everything would be marked as AI generated if it was AI generated. And so that a user using a screen reader would be able to understand that the alt text did not come from the publisher directly and was AI generated. And publishers are able to work through this at their own pace. So even if it begins with an AI generated alt text, they could go in and revise it as available. So again, there were millions of pieces of alt text that we've generated over all this time. I think that there were some publishers who were very hesitant to engage with something that was using an LLM to generate alt text for their content, but then when they understood the scale of just how much they would be responsible for putting together, I think they understood that it was, basically the only the only option to meet the goal that we had for accessibility in by April of 2026. So I think the feedback on this has been very strong from our publisher partners. I think it's been useful for them to be able to both see their alt text, update it. They can export it if they want. So we're really proud of this effort in kind of meeting them in the middle of like this is what we can provide and give you autonomy over it, but we can also, provide the service of we can create alt text for you if you're not able to. So as these feature or mandates evolve over time, these are the sorts of solutions that we're going to have to be, working with. So yeah, I think I will leave it there. Thank you so much for inviting me, and yeah, I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you so much. Thanks to both of you. When we invited you both to come speak to the group today, one thing that prompted this was that we've done a series of polls with people who attend Mubudig webinars and who want to or who watch the videos online. And many of us are working in our sort of little silos away from kind of distribution partners like the two of you. And I wondered, uh, one of the things that we've told people in the past is like always work with your librarians because your librarians really know how to catalog material, how to get these things out there. But I'm curious if you found any sort of disconnect in like library cataloging systems and the types of um, ebooks and materials that have been put out lately. I was really thinking about this, Ben, during your presentation, because we had an instance not too long ago where we realized that our librarians had once upon a time cataloged all of our digital publications as websites. And so like they weren't sort of reaching, like they were getting funneled into different buckets of content. But I wonder within this sort of like general space of like work with your librarians to get this content out there, if there are um pieces of advice with the registering of metadata or with like how to go about questions of distribution you have for museum publishers who are kind of looking into this either for the first time or anew as the landscape shifts.
Um, yes. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what advice I can just, but at least from the few years of experience with this, I can say like if your file is I mean, if the project is a bounded file, it has a certain set of options. If your project is a live URL, it has different options. I actually found something and meant to show it and completely slipped my mind as I was nervously finishing my presentation. But I can put it up on the screen if you want. But one of the Mupudig has like this spreadsheet of digital publication projects. And one of them I saw on the list was done by a friend of mine. And it was Tate Britain did this project on the history of performance art. And I wrote to my friend and who I see often. And I said, hey, I just saw your thing on this list. And he was like, oh, that's awesome. And I said, is it still actually sort of before I could even keep going, he was like, well, just by the way, it used to be totally different in 2016. We had this special tooling with like a timeline function and other information. And then when the Tate redid its website, all of our boutique code was deprecated instantly and didn't. So they kind of rebuilt this thing. And that was like, maybe it had like a version from 2016 to 2020. And then there was another version that's even the one now. So if you go to the Tate site, the thing you see now is not the thing they published in 2016. And he sent me links to the Wayback Machine, which I can post here if you want. But anyways, where it's like, this is what it used to look like. And here's the tools they used to have, and now they're just vanished. And so, yeah, I think EPUB is a format that's kind of a low. EPUB is like a format in which I have a particular interest. I didn't always have this interest, but I've grown to have this interest. I think it's overlooked and underutilized. I think it's it's HTML based. It's a website inside a folder, right? So it's on the one hand, it doesn't have a lot of publication history, or it has a lot of publication history, but only with a certain kind of book. And so there's not a lot of effort made to make nice ebooks that are high functioning or generous to a reader. But they can contain, they can do what a URL project would do. I showed that Unleashed, the Swiss catalog. I think that's a great example. I think the CCA booklets are a good example. Like there's a lot you can do with HTML that's just not given a lot of attention. And I think certainly my advocacy to a project and that we say to people when we are working with them, either as librarians or like library institutions who are working with us, or institutions who are working with us to publish things or make projects together, I'm like a big advocate for EPUB because you can do a lot with it. And I would like to say like publish for the screen, but just not for the web. The web is totally different, totally just like and you're under the same discoverability regime as like petfood.com is, like the way you find things on the web is just, doesn't have like ranked meaning or context and so on. So a lot of Library Stack's project is to kind of produce that context for this sub area of interest. Yeah, I mean, so I don't, yeah.
I think that's very interesting because I think we do sort of overlook EPUBs sometimes because they feel like they're created for a different type of publication.
Yeah.
Like maybe they're not, we're at an art museum. There are many art museums here, but they're not art museum focused, or they're not image focused, or they don't like quite tie into the needs of this sector. I know that Greg has done a lot of work with EPUBs, and some of us have built EPUBs into our publishing sort of workflow, or in the case of Art Institute, have actually kind of moved away from it. But I think I don't think that's not because we wanted to. It's just because we were kind of dealing with the cards that we were dealt. But
I mean, another thing I would say, sorry to interrupt you, but it's prompted me, like the changes in the technology are prompting changes in editorial orientation. And I think part of what is going to happen, or what ought to happen, is a productive bifurcating of different kinds of publishing for different kinds of formats. Because an ebook, an EPUB, if you try to make a handsome catalog, that's filled with images and has complex page styling and stuff, and try to make an ebook, the disappointment is inevitable. It's not what EPUB is good at, and it's not sort of why you should use it. Its virtues and attributes for distributing text and scholarship and analytical writing or creative writing or other kinds of things, it's really great at, but it's like a misnomer to think of it as an ebook. It's not a book. It's like you have to be like, I'm going to make a little tiny website for each thing. And it's, when you think of it that way, it's a lot more, I think your outcomes are a lot better. But I think just some of those things I showed, certainly these European museums that I'm aware of, I mean, many people are also doing this, but just those, as a case study, they're doing lots of publishing that is not attempting to replicate what a catalog text or what a very handsome book series would do. They're doing a totally different thing with it. And I think, to their credit, I have learned they also still make print books. for different reasons. I mean, just this bifurcation of not but like fracturing of reasons. Different publications should be made from new reasons given their new technological substrate, I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, you make a great point around EPUBs, and I'll add back to that accessibility question. Like there is a ceiling to how accessible a PDF can be, like how reflowable, the things like changing font size and all of that. So as accessibility mandates are coming down, the EPUB really is the more accessible format. So that is what we've been leaning into on the ebook side of Project Muse, is encouraging the ebook whenever publishers have them, because it's the more accessible format and we're more likely to maintain that compliance, as well as, again, being as easy to engage with for anybody using a screen reader as possible.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Edson Atwood about DOIs and Crossref. Just wondering how DOIs and something like registration with Crossref helps facilitate discovery of content. Do either of you want to take that?
I'll say very quickly, and then I'll punt to Philip. We can support a DOI. We don't currently issue DOIs, or not. We can't issue them, but work with a issuing agency,
right.
And we will. But Crossref and the ISSN issuing agency are both things in our very near-term roadmap, whereby LibraryStack will become an intermediary layer between them and the publisher, and we can facilitate that. Just to say, because sort of our sweet spot, as it were, is when there's scholarly publishing outside of, or scholars or scholarship outside of kind of recognized scholarly publishing, or art publishing that's basically convening something scholarly. We're going to try to grow to provide those kinds of data tracking layers for those things. But Philip, you probably have much more to say about this.
Yeah, so Project Muse, we do register DOIs with Crossref, and every publisher has a different situation with DOIs. Some are depositing themselves, some have content on other aggregators that are primary depositors and things like that. So we're able to calibrate that, with multiple resolution or other options to make sure that every article has a DOI. Like in the Encyclopedia of Camps and Ghettos, every entry within that encyclopedia, so thousands of entries, have their own individual DOI. So it's not a project level DOI. It's like one for each entry. And it really does facilitate discovery. I think it does go a long way toward making that leap between, as we were talking about, like a website and like a piece of scholarship, right? Something that that can be cited and referred to with a PID. So at least with Project Muse, that's just part of our workflow. As when we launch a book or a journal issue or a special project, we do register DOIs. And having a designated staff member in our metadata strategist who can navigate those with us and for us is really huge, because it gets complicated. So he's a great resource for us.
So I think we have time for one more question, and we have one here from Anne at the Clark Art Institute. So she asks, if a museum publisher is exploring digital distribution for backlist titles that are out of print, predate current digital workflows, and contain copyrighted essays and illustrations, how would you recommend assessing the rights landscape for joining sites like the LibraryStack or Project Muse? Are there any models, decision trees, or tools that could be recommended for this piece of the puzzle? I know that rights are often really tricky, so.
Yeah, that's a gnarly question.
For our last 2 minutes,
I would just, to keep it super brief, I would just say, certainly from our point of view, we would look to the institution that published it would have to clear the rights to have a digital version of this. There's a legal hurdle of getting in touch with every person who participated and making sure it's fine to do this. Then there's a technical format hurdle. Given the situation described, I think PDF is probably the safest assumption for a project like this. And then I guess there is a kind of financial decision tree, like, is this to be purchased or just circulated? Maybe it's moot, depending on the institution. You don't need to sell this PDF, although that is possible. So I think I guess that would be the decision tree, is legal, format, and commercial, non-commercial. But at the base level, if it's just a PDF, I think certainly we can do it, or same with Philip, I'm sure, right?
Right. And because of our at Muse, our the way our business model is really internationally scoped, we do require that publishers have the worldwide rights for any content that comes our way. But we can, especially with open access content, I think the Creative Commons license really is um, a great tool. And even on the image level, like if we're able to, if there's a difference between the preference there and the CC license and handling that on the image level to navigate some of those challenges, that that can be helpful in bringing some comfort that it's clear what the terms are of use for this, even though it's an open access product. Um, but yes, that is the easier said than done, I am sure, especially when you have many, many, many images in one title that you have to get permissions for each one.
And I can add that at the Art Institute, we have written a new fair use policy over the last couple of years that helps us make those decisions when it comes to legacy content and what we feel can be reproduced under fair use guidelines, especially when it has to do with old PDFs or material that's really scholarly in nature. So we're happy to share that with you, but we can talk about that more. But to close, thank you so, so much, Benjamin and Philip, for all of your sharing of knowledge today. We really appreciate it. And it's been really great to learn more about Library Stack and Project Muse. So thank you. And thanks everyone for coming. We'll see you next time.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.